Young clerk Thomas Hutter, living in Wisborg, has just married the beautiful Ellen, but is forced to leave her and travel to Transylvania, where he needs to finalize an estate deal with Count Orlok. Orlok lives as a recluse in a vast castle, is extremely old and eccentric, and, most importantly, a vampire. Although Thomas manages to escape his clutches, Orlok has already set out for Wisborg, where he plans to claim Ellen. If we count all the films and series inspired by Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, it turns out to be one of the most frequently adapted books in literary history. Dracula has several canonical screen versions that stay close to the text, which can be divided into two main branches, Dracula itself and Nosferatu, which emerged from its creator's reluctance to pay royalties. In the latter, the setting is moved from England to Germany, the characters are slightly reimagined, and, most importantly, the focus shifts. It's a more brutal and straightforward horror, where the titular character is not a tragic figure, weary of eternal loneliness, but a ruthless embodiment of death itself and everything that accompanies it: disease, plague, and madness. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu has a lot to live up to. First, of course, the classic Nosferatu, a symphony of horror from 1922 by Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau, and second, Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampire from 1979, starring Klaus Kinski and Isabelle Adjani. Both films are now considered undeniable classics, but every half-century, it's worth taking a shot at the sacred, especially when the helm is taken by Robert Eggers, one of the leading horror visionaries of our time, the creator of The Witch and the phantasmagoric The Lighthouse. Eggers first approached Nosferatu back in 2015, right after his debut with The Witch, but the preparatory period stretched out over 7 years. During that time, the roles of Ellen and Thomas were offered to Anya Taylor-Joy and Harry Styles, while actors like Mads Mikkelsen and Daniel Day-Lewis were considered for Count Orlok. It's hard to say how the film would have turned out with that cast, but as it stands now, there are, to put it mildly, some questions. There's a sense that in his work on the film, Eggers primarily drew inspiration from Murnau's original and the aesthetics of silent cinema as a whole. If you were to remove the color from his version of Nosferatu, artificially age it, and replace the dialogue with music, leaving only a few lines as intertitles, you'd get something very close to what horror films looked like a century ago: strong, precise, striking frames that you want to pause and examine, heightened emotions, and an expressive presentation. But the 2024 Nosferatu is not a silent film, and the sound breaks the magic created by the visuals. The dialogue, teetering on the edge of pretentiousness, stands out, and it becomes noticeable that Lily Rose Depp isn't just overacting, she seems to be performing in a completely different genre than everyone else. Meanwhile, the voice of Orlok, played by Bill Skarsgård, who is very proud of it, at least in the original, doesn't scare but confuses with its exaggerated accent reminiscent of a James Bond villain. The bold visuals, already cranked up to a level of expressiveness that feels excessive even for AI-generated images, combined with all these over-the-top elements, occasionally create an unexpected comedic effect. At times, it feels like you're watching not a genuine gothic horror but a parody of one, perhaps by someone like Mel Brooks. This is one of those cases where a film is made up of a brilliant elements that, combined, turn into a heavy cinephile's luxury, gleaming with visionary excess and primarily evoking a desire to find a dial to turn down all this overload.